Welcome back to the Women's Heart Health Summit. This is your host, Dr. Mark Menolascino. This is your opportunity to hear from the world's experts in women's health, heart health, and all of the topics you've ever wanted to know. Today, we're joined by Dr. Tom OBryan. Tom, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. It's really a pleasure to be with you.
Well, let me tell our viewers a little bit about you, Tom. We've known each other for many, many years. You're one of my idols in medicine. You really have taught me a lot, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share your information with everyone else.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's really a pleasure, man. We walk the same path, and it's great to high-five each other every once in a while when we see each other, some new thing we've learned, and share studies, and it's really great.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Dr. Tom OBryan, when it comes to getting healthy, Dr. Tom OBryan's goal is for you to make it easy to do the right thing. As an internationally recognized, admired, and compassionate speaker, focusing on food sensitivities, environmental toxins, and the development of autoimmune disease, Dr. Tom's audience has discovered that it is through a clear understanding of how you got to where you are that you and your doctor can figure out what it'll take you to get to where you want to be. In November 2016, Dr. Tom released Betrayal, the Autoimmune Disease Solution They're Not Telling You. It was an investigation into why our immune system, which is designed to protect us, begins to attack our own tissue, which is autoimmunity. Over 500,000 people worldwide have watched this docuseries, the betrayaldocumentary.com. And Dr. Tom is really the Sherlock Holmes for chronic disease. He teaches doctors and his clients how to recognize and address the underlying mechanisms that activate an immune response and how it's the map to the highway towards better health. He holds faculty positions with the Institute for Functional Medicine and the National University of Health Sciences. He's trained and certified tens of thousands of practitioners worldwide in the advanced understanding and impact of wheat sensitivity and the development of individual autoimmune disease. He's the founder of thedoctor.com, the visionary behind my favorite, the Gluten Summit, A Grain of Truth, that brought together 29 of the world's experts on gluten and the connection to disease, other disorders, and the wide ranges of symptoms that people of all ages deal with. So Tom, it's quite a background. Again, you've been the pioneer, you've carried the flag, you've really been the leader to help raise the awareness and not just our listeners and viewers, but also for practitioners. How do you really start to bridge the gap for practitioners who have no idea about this link of food sensitivities, toxicity, and autoimmune disease?
Oh, that's a really good question. I usually start, I had the opportunity to give a presentation last week at the Food Technology Conference at Harvard Medical School. And I started the way that I start many of my talks with a case study. Mm-hmm. And I showed him a case study of a 3-year-old girl who had abdominal problems, and her parents took her for an endoscopy. They put a tube down your throat and look at your small intestine, snip out a little piece, look at it under a microscope. And they found out this little girl's a celiac. So they explained to the parents, no wheat, never again, starting right now. And the parents said, okay. But they also said, there's something wrong with your daughter's eye. They put her under a general anesthetic, and so to do the test. And they said, there's something wrong with your daughter's eye. We have to get her to an ophthalmologist right away. So 1 week later, they're in the ophthalmologist's office, and he takes a picture of this tumor on her eyeball. So the picture shows she's looking down. So you see the black part of the eye, the pupil looking down, and they lift the eyelid up, and there's a big, ugly, mucousy tumor there.
Wow.
And because mom was diagnosed with HIV, they said, oh, this is Kaposi sarcoma. It's a tumor that you can get if you have HIV. But the little girl's blood test was negative. And so they said, well, wait a minute. So if this is not HIV related, what is it? Well, we're going to have to give her a general anesthetic and take a biopsy of the eye. They were going to cut out a piece of her eye.
Oh my gosh.
And the parents said, no. Our daughter is still reacting to the medication from the endoscopy last week. She hasn't quite recovered yet. Can we wait, please, just 1 week until she recovers? Then we'll come back and we'll do whatever it takes, of course. But we just want her to be at her best because she's only 3. And she had been sick for a while. So they said, okay, fine, come back in a week. They come back in a week, and the ophthalmologist is about to give the general anesthetic, and he looks at the eye and says, well, wait a minute. Goes back to the file, pulls out the picture that they took the previous week. The tumor was smaller. And they looked at it, and well, let's just watch this for a day or two. And then the next picture you see is 2 months later. The tumor is gone. Wow. And the only thing different in that little girl's diet was as soon as she was diagnosed with celiac, they put her on a wheat-free diet. So the ophthalmologist wrote, this obviously, this tumor was an autoimmune reaction associated with celiac, because nothing else changed in this little girl's life, and the tumor is gone within 2 months. And 9 months later, it had still not come back. So in the presentation that I gave last week, you know, guys are like this, what's this guy going to talk about, right? Like that. But then within about 3 minutes, they're like this. You know, they're looking at the screen, they're looking at the pictures, they're going, what? What? And then you got them. When you can show them a case study, or you can show them the science of something that they just were not familiar with, then they're interested and open to hearing more. And that's the way it is. And that's why events like yours are so important. These summits, they're so critically important for the general public to hear. You don't have to suffer. You don't have to continue taking medication. Now, you may need it for a while, but if you address why you need the medication, then eventually you may not need it or as much of it anymore, and thus reduce the potential side effects of that medication. So when people hear the testimonials, they hear doctors talking about different aspects of whatever the theme is, then they go, oh, all right, well, I'll try that. You know, I'll put a little attention on that. And that's why events like yours are so important, Dr.
Well,
Martin.
thank you, Tom. I've heard dozens of case studies from you throughout the years in lectures and personally that have really helped me to think differently. So many people, clients as well as practitioners, when I mention gluten sensitivity or celiac, all they think about is a digestive disorder. But it's so much more broad in that than that, isn't it, Tom?
Yeah, it's something that you would completely miss, because for every one person with gut symptoms, digestive symptoms of a food-related disorder, in this case wheat, for every one person, there are 8 people that don't have gut symptoms. They've got brain symptoms or kidney symptoms or joint symptoms or muscle symptoms, but it's not gut. The ratio is 8 to 1.
Wow.
So if you think about a food-related disorder, when your gut gets bloated or gut pain, then you'll catch 1 out of every 8. Because if that's the key by which you think foods may be a problem, you'll only think about it when they have those symptoms. But yeah, you'll miss 7 out of 8. So,
and you've told me that the average time it takes for someone to complain about a symptom until their doctor figures out it's related to gluten is 10 years.
Oh, yeah, 11.
11. Holy cow.
Yeah. So what happens is people suffer for a while. It's not too bad. You know, maybe they take an aspirin or an NSAID or something, and it gets worse. It gets worse. So eventually they go to the doctor. And the average with wheat-related disorders is 11 years and 5 different doctors from the time it was already so bad they have to go see somebody. Then from there, the average, not the exception, is 11 years. So you've got your child's got, no, that wouldn't be a good example. Say you've got depression. So you go to your general practitioner and he gives you an antidepressant, and that doesn't seem to help very much. So eventually you go back to your general practitioner and he gives you something else. And eventually, and that doesn't really seem to help too much, and you don't like the side effects. You go back, so he refers you to a neurologist. The neurologist gives you a stronger medication, and that kind of numbs you out a little bit, but it doesn't really help too much. And you go back to the neurologist, and he sees that you had 2 different meds from the general practitioner. You've already tried this medication that he thought of, so he refers you to it's called a tertiary research center. It's a neurology research center where they do really fancy tests and they can't find anything wrong. So they refer you to a psychiatrist, because it must all be in your head that you're depressed, right? Because there's obviously nothing wrong. and the psychiatrist wants to give you some more medications or different medications. And then you're laying on a massage table. You decide to get a massage for yourself. So this is now the 5th practitioner, the massage. And she says, oh, my mom had symptoms like that. She just stopped weed and they all went away. And then your symptoms go away. So that's the average. 11 years, 5 practitioners.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just jaw-dropping when you see the statistics, because people don't think it's a problem. They just can't imagine that wheat or dairy, that certain foods that are in our diet every day could be a problem. They just can't imagine that.
Well, Tom, you were talking about mood disorders, and I do believe antidepressants are the #1 prescribed medicine on the planet. And I know you're an expert in adrenal health and thyroid health. How do you tie the gluten sensitivity to thyroid health? That seems to be such a big link with Hashimoto's and some of these other autoimmune issues. How do you share that with people for our viewers to really understand the link of gluten and thyroid?
Well, that's a really good question. So, Mrs. Patient, when you get a vaccination for measles, they give you a shot of the bug, measles, and your brain says, whoa, what is this? I better fight this. And in your immune system, you have Army, Air Force, Marine Corps generals sitting around with nothing to do. You general, you now are General Measles. Take care of this. General Measles builds an assembly line. The assembly line starts producing soldiers. They're called antibodies. They're special forces. They're highly trained to just go after measles. So they go out into the bloodstream. It takes a couple of months to really build this assembly line. They go out into the bloodstream, and you remember your blood's just a highway. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of traffic on the highway, and there's no lanes of traffic. It's like driving in New Delhi, India. You know, everything's bouncing into each other. You know, there's no lanes, there's no regulation to it, you know, just bouncing around. And so special forces are looking for measles. Everywhere they see measles, they fire their high-powered rifle to destroy measles. General Measles, when he sees that that all the measles bugs from the vaccination are gone, General Measles says, okay, turn off the assembly line. We don't need those antibodies out there now. And you shouldn't have measles antibodies in your bloodstream right now if you were to do a blood test, unless you've been exposed, and then of course you should. But General Measles is vigilant the rest of his life. The rest of his life, that if measles ever comes back into your body, if you're sitting on an airplane and the guy behind you just came from Africa and, and he's like coughing terribly, you go, but you breathe in measles, General Measles is vigilant. Anytime you're exposed, he just has to flip the switch. He doesn't have to build the assembly line again that takes months. He just flips the switch, and in a day or two, you got special forces out there attacking any of that measles that you inhaled. That's how vaccinations work. And everybody knows, you know, if you go to Africa, you need vaccinations months ahead of time for yellow fever, dengue fever, all these weird diseases. But if you go back 20 years later, you just need a booster shot 2 weeks before you go. You just have to wake up general dengue fever and general yellow fever or general measles. Just have to wake. That's what booster shots are for.
Right. Right.
So the same thing happens with foods. If you make antibodies to food, if your immune system says this is a problem for whatever reason, but says this is a problem, you make antibodies to foods. Those antibodies are special forces looking for wheat wherever they see wheat in the bloodstream. And the identity of the wheat molecule, it's like somebody's wearing an orange vest. And it's different amino acids. But let's say somebody's walking around with an orange vest. You're looking for orange vest. And when you see orange vest, when you see that amino acid structure, the antibodies fire their chemical bullet. So let's say that orange vest, the amino acids is AABCD. I'm just going to make up the sequence. And usually it's much longer, 8 or 10 or 33 amino acids. But that's what the antibodies are going for the orange vest. They're looking for AABCD. Uh-huh. Well, now the antibodies in the bloodstream are going right past the surface of the thyroid. They're going right past the thyroid. They go everywhere. Well, the surface of the thyroid facing the blood vessels is made up of proteins and fats. The proteins in the surface of the blood vessels of the thyroid facing the bloodstream include AABCD. So now the antibodies that are looking for wheat, AABCD, they see over there AABCD, go, oh, look, and they fire their chemical bullet at your thyroid.
Great analogy. Yeah.
You damage your thyroid cell.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to make antibodies to get rid of the damaged thyroid cell. I mean, why is it ever okay to have antibodies to our own tissue? If you do a blood test for thyroid antibodies, there's a normal reference range. And if you're outside the range, it's a problem, but there's a normal reference range. When is it normal to have antibodies to your own tissue? Every day, because we have to get rid, Mrs. Patient, you have an entire new body every 7 years. Every cell in your body regenerates. Some cells really quickly, the inside lining of your guts every 3 to 5 days. Some cells are very slow, like your bone cells, your brain cells, but we regenerate every cell in our body. So how do you do that? Well, your immune system makes antibodies to get rid of the old and damaged cells to make room for the new cells. And that's how you make new cells. So there's a normal reference range of thyroid antibodies that's consistent with, oh, good, that's a normal amount because he's making that many, he's losing that many. That's a normal reference range. No problems. But when wheat antibodies attack your thyroid, and because of your genetic vulnerability, they go after the thyroid, and you eat wheat every day, so every day you're attacking your thyroid more, you have to make more antibodies than you should normally to get rid of the extra damaged cells. Right. And that happens every day. You have toast for breakfast, sandwich for lunch, pasta for dinner, croutons on your salad, day after week, after month, after year, after year. And if the weak link in your chain is your thyroid, you're making antibodies to your thyroid, to your thyroid, to your thyroid, to your thyroid. Eventually, that becomes self-perpetuating and you develop an autoimmune disease of your thyroid. Then when you get rid of wheat, for many people, just by getting wheat completely out of the diet, for those people that have that genetic vulnerability and the weak link is their thyroid antibodies come down to normal within 3 to 6 months. Because they're no longer throwing the gasoline on the fire. They're no longer causing the extra antibodies that are killing off your thyroid, if that's your genetic weak link.
Well, Tom, that story of the autoimmune thyroid and how really that's the basis of all autoimmune disease. And if you follow that same general measles model, that's what's going on with really all autoimmune, and someone should start there first. How do you tie this to heart health for women? How is this relationship with the gluten, the autoimmune, general measles? How do you tie that to heart health for women?
Well, there's 2 aspects of that answer. The first one will be an example, a case study. 44-year-old guy comes in. His father died at 44 of a massive coronary. His 2 older brothers died in their 40s of massive coronaries. He was 28 when his last brother died. So he went to a cardiologist who said, you look healthy, but let's put you on a statin just to protect you. So he was put on a statin unnecessarily. He didn't have high cholesterol, but they kept his cholesterol down pretty low. And he comes in 14 years later, or 16 years later, he's now 44, and he's a picture of health. Because of his family history, being the last male in the family, he's always been meticulous about taking care of himself, never eats junk, only quality food, exercises regularly, 16% body fat, healthy business, healthy family life, lovely family, kids, and his lovely relationship with his wife, really a happy man. And he said, but I heard about your tests. I want to do your tests. So we ran a test on him that looked at antibodies to a number of different tissues in your body. So it's 24 different antibodies that we look at. Turns out all 3 antibodies to his heart were sky high.
Wow.
Sky high. And he said, and what that meant was his immune system was killing off his heart. But he was healthy as a horse. Every year his physical, doctor says you're as healthy as a horse. Don't worry about it. Everything's great.
His heart's being attacked and he has no idea.
No idea. He had no symptoms whatsoever. No symptoms. Felt strong and healthy. Doctors validating he's doing everything right. But no one looked at autoimmunity. And so sky high. And he says, why is that? And I said, I don't know. Let's find out. Turns out that he had many different antibodies to wheat, and many different antibodies to dairy. And what I mean by many, the different components of wheat, different components of dairy. He was gluten and dairy sensitive. So we took gluten and dairy out of his diet, didn't change anything else. He was already on a ton of vitamins. Everything looked great. That's all we did. Came back 6 months later, recheck, heart antibodies down to normal, completely down to normal. Just shut down the autoimmune mechanism. He said, "You saved my life." No, well, you know, the researchers that do all this work and put the test together, they did that, you know, but now you know. Gluten and dairy, never again for you, because you have an extreme sensitivity for that to manifest as attacking your heart.
So Tom, if he can't get by with just a little bit, he has to go completely zero. Otherwise,
that's
those
a really
antibodies
good
will come
question.
back.
And so General Measles is vigilant the rest of his life. General Measles is called a memory B cell. And you ask an immunologist, and you make memory B cells when you have elevated antibodies to wheat. You make memory B cells. They're there forever. And ask an immunologist, how much measles does it take to activate general measles to turn on the assembly line to make the antibodies? And they'll tell you 1/1000th of the vaccine dose. 1/1000th. So you're gluten sensitive. You're doing everything to stay away from wheat after you do the test and you find out. You're in a restaurant, they bring you a salad, they put croutons on it. You say, "Oh man, I'm hungry." So you just pick the croutons off, very carefully pick them off. The crumbs left on the greens that you can't see is enough to activate general gluten in your gut. So if you've got memory B cells, if you have elevated antibodies, you have to be squeaky clean, or you may activate the antibodies to wheat, and then wherever the weak link is in your chain, whether it's your thyroid or your heart, here come the antibodies to your thyroid or to your heart again, and the whole, or your brain, and the entire autoimmune mechanisms is back on track.
So Tom, I'm sure women that come to see me and ask about this, they ask me, "Well, Mark, can I just have a little bit of it? Isn't that okay if I do everything else right?" And you and I were having dinner, and I shared with you my philosophy of moderation. I'm a doctor of moderation. You should be able to cheat a little bit once in a while. And you told me, "Well, Mark, if you're making these autoantibodies, do you want any of them at all?" So I went and tested myself. And I grew up with irritable bowel syndrome. I thought it was mainly dairy, but my antibodies to gluten were positive. And so I went, based on our dinner conversation, I went 0% gluten. I felt better energy-wise. I slept better, which is the biggest thing I noticed. I dropped that little Italian gut that I've always carried in my belly. And when I cheat, now I really notice my sleep, my energy, my body. I just feel differently.
Yeah.
And I didn't appreciate it till I went completely to zero for a month. And is that what you see with your patients too? They really need to go to zero before they really can tell if it makes a difference?
Oh, you can't be a little pregnant. You can't have a little gluten. If you've got elevated antibodies, your immune system, trying to protect you, trying to save your life, will do everything it can to get rid of this threat. Now, our friend Mark Houston, he brought this concept up a number of years ago, and it's just stayed with me ever since. He says, you know, we've got the same bodies as our ancestors, and we have a limited number of responses to an unlimited number of insults.
I love that. I love that comment.
Mean? It means our ancestors only had to fight. Their immune systems had to protect them against bugs, parasites, viruses, molds, and fungus. That was it. There was nothing else the immune system had to protect you from. Bugs, parasites, viruses, molds, fungus. Right now, we've got bisphenol A, red dye number 42, mercury in the fish, lead in the air, that we have the phthalates in our food from the plastic wrap or the plastic storage containers, and the phthalates leach into the food. The flame retardant chemicals in our bedding equipment that we're breathing every night. All the wheat, you know, all of these different components that we're exposed to on a daily basis. It's just overwhelming to the immune system, overwhelming. And it can only respond as if it's a bug, parasite, virus, mold, or fungus. That's all it can do.
So we know for autoimmune disease, was it 10 or 11 times more common in women than men?
The average is 9 to 1.
9 to 1. And for someone with autoimmune disease, there's a 10 times increased risk of heart disease. We know that autoimmune disease, which is more common in women, leads to heart disease. And that's the sneaky thing where we've all had patients that exercise every day, they're lean, they eat right, they may not have a family history, and they have a heart attack with normal cholesterol. No one understands that.
People have to learn that the way that we treated patients 10, 15, 20 years ago, it doesn't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Those protocols don't work. They're helpful, but we have to do something more now. And the reason is we're much more toxic. The Journal of Pediatrics published a paper. It's 250 pounds of toxic chemicals per person per day are released in the United States.
Wow.
250 pounds per person per day, every single day. Newborn babies today, every newborn baby has over 180 toxic chemicals in their bloodstream at birth. Many
How
of them
scary,
are
Tom. How scary.
neurotoxins. Yeah. So what we have to learn is that the old ways don't work anymore the way they used to. What's the new way? The new way is that along with food selections and proper nutrition, we have to protect our body from the inordinate amount of toxic exposures
Absolutely.
we're all getting. This is why women have more autoimmune disease than men, is because many of those toxic chemicals are called endocrine disrupting chemicals. They disrupt your hormones. They bind onto your hormone receptor sites. It's why men, the average now, Mark, the average, they did a meta-analysis. That's when you look at a whole lot of studies on one subject. Between 1974 and 2011, in 37 years, there's been a 59% reduction in sperm count in healthy men, not infertile men, healthy men. 59% reduction. And that sounds like, yeah, whatever, okay. No. Scientists tell us they worry about extinction of a species at 72%.
Wow.
And we've lost 59% in 37 years. What do you think is going to happen in the next 20 years? Is it going to get magically better?
I can't imagine so. And you talk about the hormone disruption of toxins for females, you combine that with sperm counts for men, and we're real trouble.
We're in
This
real trouble.
toxicity autoimmune link, Tom, how do you tie these hormone disrupting chemicals like bisphenol A and the flame retardants, the chemicals in our kids' clothing, but how do you tie these toxins to autoimmune disease with the hormone imbalance and hormone disruption? What's the common thread there?
Yeah, the common thread. So let's take it with the heart as an example,
Please.
if we can. What you see is when someone has bypass surgery, as an example, and they take out the old plugged up pipes, and when they look at those pipes, if they analyze them, they're loaded with antibodies to different toxins, to bacterial toxins, to chemical toxins. They're loaded with bacteria. I mean, just loaded. So Heliobacter is a very common one. 50% of the world's population has Heliobacter. In third world countries, it's 90% of everybody has Heliobacter. It's a bacteria that lives in your GI tract, mostly in the stomach, but also in the mouth, all the way down the GI tract. If that Heliobacter bacteria gets into your bloodstream, general Heliobacter gets called out, and you make antibodies to it. Well, you just have to go to that great library in the sky, Google, and type in Heliobacter and cardiovascular disease. Here come all the studies that your immune system, trying to protect you from this bug that's in your bloodstream, those antibodies can start attacking your blood vessels, and you get atherosclerosis, hardening of your pipes. And what we know now about atherosclerosis is that it's an autoimmune mechanism that sets it off. That's what sets off the whole thing about plugging up your pipes, is your immune system trying to protect you from something. It's Heliobacter, it's mercury, it's lead, it's oxidative fats. LDL is not bad for you. Bad LDL is bad for you. And that's the oxidative LDLs. Regular LDL, that historically we've called the bad cholesterol, is the raw material that our hormones come from. Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, insulin, melatonin, serotonin, they all come from cholesterol. Your stress hormones come from LDL cholesterol. So when you have high LDL cholesterol, we shouldn't be saying, let's get it down, let's get it down. No, we should be saying, why is your LDL cholesterol high? Why is your body demanding more of this raw material? Now, the oxidative LDLs, those are the bad guys, and you want those down anytime you find them.
Well, we were talking with Joel Kahn about this the other day, and the particle sizes and how these advanced tests are available, but so many doctors aren't using them. The other relationship is, you mentioned, in these
May I stay with that? May I stay with that for a minute?
Please.
When I'm on stage, many times I'll say, how many of you are familiar with subfractionation and particle size cholesterol testing? Almost everybody raises their hand. I'll say, how many of you have had it done?
Yes.
Maybe 10 people out of 200 raise their hand. And I say, what's the matter with you? They all laugh. What's the matter with you? Well, insurance doesn't pay for it. Are you kidding me? That this is a much more sensitive test to determine if you're at risk of plugging up your pipes. And we think of cardiovascular disease as the #1 killer in the world. #1, cancer is #2, autoimmunity is #3. We think of it as #1. So you've got a much more sensitive test that with insurance billing, the patient pays $60 or $80, something like that. And you're not doing this for yourself and your family or recommending it to your patients. I mean, if you challenge the test, whether it's valid or not, great, do a little reading and you'll see it's really valid.
Yes.
But if you're not doing, can't get around to it. Well, it's that complacency that's going to trigger the development of cardiovascular disease in you.
Well, Tom, you're so right. And I know for myself, I check my labs, the advanced cholesterol panel, every year. I've done a calcium score, which is a way to look through a very short, low dose radiation dose of a CAT scan at your heart arteries. Mine's 0, thank goodness. There's ultrasound CIMT women can do that bypasses radiation. And, it's this walking the walk and talking the talk that I know you live so well, and you've taught me. You encouraged me to go look at my own antibodies, and I did, and I found something out, not just about myself laboratory-wise, but I put it into action clinically, and it made a difference for me. When people ask you about this testing for food sensitivities and for looking for gluten sensitivity, it seems like so many people have gotten tested and are told it's negative when they really do have a problem. Is it because the original testing is not very good, or they're getting the wrong test? How do you advise people about that?
That's a really good point. Mrs. Patient, proteins are like a pearl necklace. Hydrochloric acid made in your stomach undoes the clasp of the pearl necklace. Now you have a string of pearls. Your digestive enzymes from the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas, the microbiota, these enzymes act like scissors to snip that pearl necklace smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Snip, 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 until you're down to each pearl of the pearl necklace. That's called an amino acid. Now, your intestines are a tube. It starts at the mouth, goes to the other end. If you had a donut and you just stretched a donut out and you look down the center of the donut, that's your intestines, right?
Great analogy.
Well, the inside the intestines is lined with cheesecloth. So as your food is being snipped smaller and smaller and smaller, so when you swallow food, if you look down the tube, it's still in the tube. It's not in the body. It's in the tube. And it's got to go through the walls of the tube to get into the bloodstream. Then it goes out into the body, right? The inside of the tube is lined with cheesecloth. So big parts of the pearl necklace can't get through. They've got to go further down, being snip, 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 snip. That's why your intestines are 25 feet long. One of the reasons is because there's a lot of snipping that has to be done. Our ancestors, they harvest an animal and they're, the raw meat, and, they're chewing on this meat. And it takes a while to break down prime rib. It takes a whole lot longer to break down prime rib than it does a banana. And so it's snip, 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 snip. And then eventually it's small enough, it goes right through the cheesecloth into the bloodstream. Now, there are many particles of the pearl necklace, many clumps of the pearl necklace when you eat wheat. because no human has the enzymes to break down wheat into each pearl of the pearl necklace.
So no one has those enzymes, right, Tom?
No human, right? There's 5 studies in my training program. Look at what these people, look what they say at Harvard. Look at this. No human has the scissors to break down wheat completely. The best we can do is clumps of the pearl necklace called peptides. And those peptides are inflammatory in the gut. They tear the cheesecloth. That's what leaky gut is. They tear the cheesecloth. Then these bigger molecules get through the tears in the cheesecloth into the bloodstream. If they get into the bloodstream, then your immune system has to fight these things and say, oh my gosh, we need to fight this. And that's when you do a blood test to see, is your immune system fighting wheat? Now, the problem is every laboratory in the world does the blood test that came out in 1997 called alpha-gliadin. No, it came out in 1992, alpha-gliadin. And every lab does that. And some labs also include the one that came out in 1997, deamidated gliadin. So they'll do maybe 2 of these clumps of the pearl necklace. But there's over 62 clumps of the pearl necklace that your immune system reacts to.
So we're really looking like this.
Right, we're looking like this. So if you do the standard test and it comes back positive, you got a problem. But if it comes back negative, it doesn't mean you don't have a problem. All they can say is, well, you don't have a problem with alpha-gliadin or deamidated gliadin. Well, do I have a problem with wheat or with gluten? Well, we don't know. We only check these 2. Well, why didn't you check the rest? Well, our hospital doesn't allow us to order that test.
So trust the positive, don't ignore the negative, correct?
Yeah. So there's new testing now. There's 2 laboratories on the cutting edge. One laboratory is called Cyrex, and their test number 3 looks at 10 different peptides of poorly digested wheat. The other lab is called Vibrant Wellness, and they look at 26 peptides of poorly digested wheat. And you find much more positives in a clinical practice in your office. You'll find 7 to 8 out of every 10 people you check have elevated antibodies to wheat if you look thorough enough.
And you're right, Tom. Those are the tests that we use in our practice. And people who've come in being negative on other tests, the old-fashioned tests, I like to think of it,
right,
are positive on this test. And they also have issues. So it's really lifting up the rock to find it.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing about antibodies to wheat is depending on your genetics and how you've lived your life so far, that's called the antecedents. With your genetics and your antecedents, that determines where the weak link in your chain is. Mrs. Patient, you pull at a chain, it always breaks at the weakest link. So at one end, the middle, the other end is your heart, your brain, your liver, wherever your weak link is. So stop pulling on the chain so hard. Well, what does that mean? If your immune system says you have a problem with wheat, stop completely and calm down those antibodies. 6 months later, you recheck and you say, oh, look, the antibodies are down to normal. And the patient, well, can I eat wheat now? And he said, well, it's unlikely because there's general gluten that's out there now. But if you want to try, go ahead, you can try. Let's just recheck you in a month. So every day or every couple of days, just have a little bit of wheat, see how, if you last. Most people get really sick when they do it. So it's up to you if you want. I don't recommend it, but if you want to do it, go ahead. Just make sure in a month you recheck. And if you see the antibodies have come back, that means absolutely you cannot. Because if your antibodies to wheat come back, wherever your genetic weak link is, the antibodies to your thyroid or the antibodies to your heart or the antibodies to your brain will come back. And that's the autoimmune mechanism, and that will kill you.
Tom, I love your analogies, your metaphors. It really tells me how great of a clinician you are about how you explain things to people.
Oh,
how do you explain to them how the wheat we grew up with is different than the wheat our kids are eating today? What's so different about it?
Yeah, and that's an important consideration, but I'll preface to say that's not the reason why no one can digest wheat. It's more aggressive today than it was back then. It was in the 1960s, I think, that they developed dwarf wheat, which is a smaller, it doesn't grow as high. The problem was wheat would grow really high, 4 or 5 feet, and the wind would break it and it would die.
The amber waves of grain.
That's exactly right, which I'd love to see in the fields. That looks really nice. So dwarf wheat produced much more tonnage per acre, so they could get more off of the land. And that has much more gluten in it. And what industry has demanded is higher gluten wheat. So their bread, the wheat strains are bred now for higher gluten content. So that's the first thing. And gluten is a whole family of proteins, 62 different proteins that we know.
62 different proteins.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, not just gliadin, not just alpha gliadin. And by the way, gluten is not bad for you. Bad gluten is bad for you.
What's the difference, Tom? What's the difference?
Gluten is a category of proteins, and there's alpha gliadins in the gluten family, omega gliadins, gamma gliadins, glutenins. There's families of glutens, and it's the family of glutens in wheat, rye, and barley that are the problem, not the glutens in rice or in corn. Now, you can be sensitive to rice and corn, and a large percentage of people are, but it's a different discussion. That all of the research on wheat and rye and barley is because they come from one family, and no human has the enzymes to break down that family of gluten proteins.
Tom, how come I never heard any of this in the 20 minutes of nutrition I got in medical school? I don't think many doctors have ever even heard this before, let alone people listening. Yeah.
So when doctors hear my talks, or if they do my online certification program in gluten sensitivity, they just go, what? I didn't know this, but you can't argue with it because here's a study from the Journal of the American Medical Association. Here's a study from the British Medical Journal. Here's the study from Lancet. And I'm just quoting the studies. So docs see this, they go, whoa, this is a paradigm shift. This is a big change.
You mentioned leaky gut earlier and the way the cheesecloth with the pearl necklace. Can you give us a easily digestible way for the viewers to really think about leaky gut? I couldn't use that term in medical school, and I like the intestinal permeability, especially when people search the internet, because it keeps them away from some of the not factual information. Right. But leaky gut is a fun term to talk about. How do you share that model with people so they can get it right away?
When you get tears in the cheesecloth, bigger molecules called macromolecules get through those tears in the cheesecloth before they've gone further down the digestive tract and been snipped small enough to go through the cheesecloth. So if that macromolecule gets through a tear in the cheesecloth, it's the job of your immune system trying to protect you that says, what the heck is this? This is not something I can use to make new bone cells or brain cells. I better fight this. And now you make antibodies to strawberries or to bananas or to carrots or to chicken or to lamb. And these are the people that do a 90 food sensitivity blood test, and they come back sensitive to 20, 25 foods. And, oh my God, that's everything I eat. Well, of course it is. Your immune system's trying to protect you. When you heal the gut and stop the tears in the cheesecloth, wait 6 months and check again, you're sensitive to 2 foods, maybe 3.
Well, Tom, I've always just loved how you take the super complex and make it practical and actionable. And I encourage all of our viewers to look for you and find more of your talks, more of your online presence. You really take this complicated gluten problem and make it easy for people. One of my patients, I was at a restaurant just about a year and a half ago, and the cook came out he wanted to see who was the anti-gluten king. And he wanted to meet me because he'd heard about me.
Yeah.
And he came out and said, I want to meet the anti-gluten king doctor. And before I could say something, one of my patients came up from 4 tables away and said, I used to have rheumatoid arthritis. I was on a medication that's been known to cause long-term infections, even kill people with lymphoma. Dr. Mark got me off of it by finding I was sensitive to gluten and changing how I ate and supporting my digestive health. My markers are totally negative. He couldn't believe that, put his head down and walked back to the kitchen. So we see these successes, Tom, and I know you have them every day in your clinic.
All the time.
In your practice. So how do people find more about you, more about your messaging? Because this is such an important topic for women and for women's heart health.
Oh, it's just critical. The topic is critical. And the website is thedr.com, thedoctor.com. And there are a books, there are training programs, there's all kinds of information. Our goal is really to make it easy to do the right thing. That's really what we're trying to do for people. And if you understand these kinds of analogies and you do a deep dive into the science, you see that they're right on the money. You know, they're accurate.
Absolutely.
But the goal here is that we all have to up our game in protecting ourselves and our families. We can't protect ourselves the way we did 10 years ago. It just won't work anymore because this world of toxicity is so extreme. The estimate is by 2026, 1 child in 2 will be on the autism spectrum. This is like, what? It's not sustainable.
Yes.
And we have to learn, how do we protect ourselves and our families? And that's critically important. And we try our best to make that kind of information accessible and understandable.
Well, Tom, I know your passion is the whole person. And we've talked mainly about heart health on this summit, but we know that the heart and brain are tied together. I know you're working on a very exciting project for the brain. Could you share that with us?
Sure, you bet. Thank you for that. I read an article in the Netherlands Heart Journal in 2013. It was entitled "The Heart-Brain Connection, Mechanistic Insights and Models." And they just go right through how the message that the brain sends to the heart is balanced by the messages the heart sends to the brain. And you can develop brain deterioration if you've got abnormal heart function. You can develop heart deterioration if you have abnormal brain function, that they're intimately connected. And we have a brain master class. And the goal here, and I chose the brain because everyone knows someone who had a heart attack, survived, changed their diet, started exercising, and they're doing great. They look better than they've looked in years. Most of us know someone that was diagnosed with cancer. They went through the protocols, whatever they were, put it all in remission, they're doing good. No one knows anyone diagnosed with a brain deterioration disease who's doing good.
Yes.
So I decided to take the most threatening, fearful topic and show how when you apply these functional medicine principles in a sequential way, that you arrest and reverse the disease that you're suffering with. And that's true of heart disease, that's true of liver disease or kidney disease, but I took it from the aspect of the brain so that people can really dial it down, because it scares the heck out of all of us.
It does.
When it's about brain function.
Well, if you're fixing the brain, you're fixing the heart, you're fixing the gut.
Exactly right.
You're really working on all of those.
You know, I talked about there are 4 pillars when dealing with health concerns.
Please.
There are really 4 pillars.
Please share them with us.
And I see it as a pyramid. So I call it the pyramid of health. The first one is the base of the pyramid, the platform. That's your structure. That's the home of chiropractic, cranial sacral technique, a massage, orthotics in your shoes, the pillows you sleep with. Anytime you have a structural problem, you can have dysfunction of your heart, your cardiovascular system, or any other system of your body. And there's lots of studies on that. The next is the biochemistry. That's one side of the pyramid. And we all know about food and drugs and air we breathe and what we drink, how it affects our health. And we want to learn more, but we've heard a lot about that category. The next side is the emotional or the spiritual. And we've heard of stinking thinking, and the stress that we live under creates stress hormones, then the entire cascade can manifest at wherever the weak link in your chain is. And there's lots of studies on that. And the last one that's new for most people is electromagnetics. And the electromagnetic poisons that we're exposed to now, never before in the history of humans have we had these. And what we do with these things, you know, put them up here, and the incidence of brain tumors. I mean, everyone needs to spend the $50 to get a case on your phone. This one is called Pong, P-O-N-G. I don't know if it's the best or not, but it works. You know, I drive an Acura, and when I walk up to the car, the lights turn on by the door handle, and the dome lights turn on automatically as I'm walking up close to the car. It's kind of cool. If I'm holding my phone in the same hand as my keys, the message from the key doesn't go to the car. And I try to unlock it, it doesn't. Oh, yeah, I've got my phone.
That's scary.
That's how I know the Pong works. That's how I know it works. So we all need, and see, in the book that I just wrote, You Can Fix Your Brain, 1 hour a week to the best memory, productivity, and sleep you've ever had. It's the 1 hour a week that people need to understand. You allocate 1 hour a week to learning something new about fixing your heart, about correcting your cardiovascular imbalance, just 1 hour, because it's so overwhelming. Yes. All the information you're going to get in this summit is just overwhelming. And you after a while, you throw the baby out the bathwater because you know
what you can use. Yeah.
So you take 1 hour every Tuesday night after dinner, every Sunday morning after church, whenever it is, but 1 hour a week every week to implement one more thing. When you learn that phthalates from plastic can get into your blood vessels and trigger more inflammation, then you're going to get the plastics out of your kitchen. You get rid of the plastic wrap. You get rid of the plastic storage containers. You give them to your husband to store nails out in the garage with.
A great idea.
And but it's going to take you an hour to order glass containers from Amazon or Miles Kimball or somewhere. It's going to take you an hour. So 1 hour, and then you're done for the rest of your life. Your family is protected this much from phthalates because you aren't using them in your kitchen anymore.
And maybe they can take a girlfriend with them or a family member and spend that hour with somebody doing this. That would be even better, right?
Yeah, that's really a great idea. But that's what it's going to take to turn around the diseases that more and more of us are getting now, is to get a big picture overview. How is my life being exposed to all of these toxins that are triggering the inflammation that's manifesting in my cardiovascular system?
Absolutely.
So absolutely, you have high blood pressure, you take the meds. Or you take the natural approach, and if it doesn't work, you take the meds until you figure out, why is this happening to me? And when you address the whys and you have your doctor monitor you, eventually he'll be able to reduce the dosing on your meds.
Well, that's the bottom line, is that this is root cause medicine. We're the why guys.
Yeah,
why is this going on? And
that's right.
Dr. Tom OBryan, you've given us so many great pearls, so much inspiration, so many great metaphors and analogies that everyone who's been watching today is just very fortunate to have you. And I feel very blessed to have you in my life. Thank you for the work you're doing. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Mark. It's really a privilege. And thank you to everyone that's listening. 1 hour a week, and you will get this.